Welcome to the Entail AI Podcast, discussions with marketing executives sharing their latest techniques for growing their businesses online.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Entail Podcast, where we interview B2B and B2C marketing leaders. And today I'm very happy to have with me Greg Chase, Director of Marketing at PagerDuty. Hi, Greg. Good evening for you there in San Francisco. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on the show, Tom.
Yeah, very happy to have you here. Greg, before we start, maybe you want to take a minute and introduce yourself and your company.
Sure. So I am the Director of Product Marketing at PagerDuty. PagerDuty helps our customers achieve operational excellence in their IT operations with our platform, the PagerDuty Operations Cloud. I myself am in charge of marketing the commercial products based on our open source project Rundeck, which is a automation platform for DevOps engineers and IT administrators looking to automate tasks that run across a multitude of systems, such as like a series of commands or API calls.
So Rundeck was acquired by PagerDuty?
So Rundeck is an open source project for this product, and it was originally a startup company that was acquired by PagerDuty about 3 years ago.
And you've worked at Rundeck before or PagerDuty? I mean,
I was one of the first hired at PagerDuty to help Rundeck in the integration and the go-to-market forward from there.
that's very cool. And do you look at I mean, usually the topics that we cover are mostly about marketing and also like very much the intersection between marketing and product. And I think open source is a very interesting angle for marketing. Not many companies really leverage that. So I'll be happy to speak about that today, about having an open source project in your company, whether this is really a viable marketing channel, and really all the consequences and intricacies of that. So maybe you can just like outline that like high level, whether this was really like a go-to market strategy for your company.
Well, so first of all, I would be careful that open source has multiple kinds of goals that you might achieve from it, and I wouldn't necessarily consider open source to be a marketing strategy, although there are marketing benefits from having an open core project or open core product or a open source first approach. Certainly, some amazing companies have done great things with that ethos. Red Hat being among the top of those. In the case of Rundeck, it sort of began as an open source project before the company was formed around it, and it's an important part of the development of the product. And it's also been sort of the beginning of the how we drove awareness and how we came to know potential users for selling the commercial version to it. But definitely, it's not the only part of our go-to-market strategy.
So how would you define the main goals, or what are the options for a company considering to use open source?
Well, so first, I would actually say what you want to do is really understand what it is that you want to achieve for uh, having your products based on open source projects. And you should design your open source strategy according to those goals. So first and foremost, what open source projects really are for is for collaboration between developers to create software.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's really the main goal is how do we get people from maybe even different kinds of companies in different places to collaborate together and build something. A second key point of that is incorporating the software that they're building together into maybe other larger projects and commercial releases, generally without royalties. This is the point of permissive licenses on open source software like Apache V2 or the MIT license. Some other things you can use open source for is collaboration between partners if you want to build an ecosystem strategy. So this makes it easier to collaborate with people that might be building integrations or people that are building ensuring compatibility between your software and their software. And then from there, you may find yourself basically developing a community, and you need to understand what kind of community you want to actually create out of these things. Is it the developers who are working together to collaborate on the software, or are you looking for maybe trying to address end users of the software?
Okay, so is it difficult, by the way, to get developers engaged in a new open source project?
I mean, awareness is always the problem. There's a gazillion open source projects out there, and there's different ways to try and
Mhm.
achieve that awareness. But yeah, some degree of evangelism and discovery helps. If you have famous people that happen to know about your open source project and help push it, that definitely can drive awareness as well.
So in general, you're saying that open source, one goal of having an open source project is the collaboration between developers. Building a community is another one, and then basically like also helping you develop your product and build that project. um, but there's definitely the certain aspect, I mean, even within the community itself, the certain aspect of building awareness for your company, probably
Yes.
especially if you're targeting developers eventually, right? If you're selling a product like you mentioned, like Reddit, where the developers are the end users, it can be very beneficial. Um, so how would you, what would you say is like, if you needed to like dissect that, or to say, okay, is it more about building a community, or is it more about helping you build the product that you're working on, or it really depends on each project separately?
It really kind of depends on your goals, and in fact, that might be some of your choice of how you actually create the open source, or how do you govern the open source project. So, for example, a common approach is people will donate code to the Apache Software Foundation, and
Mhm.
their motto is community over code. So they're more about the people and the collaboration and working together in the community in a governed kind of way that ensures that everybody can appropriately contribute to
Mhm.
the project, versus like a single vendor project where or even if it's yourself starting an open source project and slapping an Apache license on it, and you're the sole committer that decides what code that goes in there. It may be you're very interested in just trying to get people to help you build the whatever it is that you're trying to build.
As you already understand, I mean, I'm mostly interested in the marketing aspect of
Yes.
things.
Yeah.
So I mean, as much as open source is exciting and it is as a project, to me it seems like, if done right, and if, like you say, if you set it as a goal, it can be a very smart way of basically like hacking growth in a way. If you can build a community, if you can reach more people and get your end users involved in or engaged in your project, or even become evangelists that help you promote your project. I'm just wondering how viable of a channel it is, and how much resources it really requires.
It's really easy to start, and I think that's why a lot of companies sort of just a lot of the companies I see, at least in Silicon Valley, they sort of start life around an open source GitHub and begin to build from there, because they can get some of that awareness and that buzz if they get the attention of influencers, for example. But the community, and you were talking about end users, it's that can be an interesting discussion by itself, because oftentimes the end users of the software are not the same kind of people who would contribute to the development. I'll give you one example. One of the open source projects I've worked with in the past is the Greenplum database. It's a data warehouse based off of Postgres. The end users of this product are typically BI analysts or data scientists or data engineers, and they're fluent in SQL and they might know how to do machine learning, but they're probably not able to contribute to the development of the query optimizer. I mean, similarly, Rundeck, our typical user is an IT admin or a DevOps engineer, and they might be able to do some contribution to the software, but for the most part, they're interested in solving their problems, which are fairly different from the building of the software itself, if you know what I mean.
Okay, so in that case, it's, I mean, the open source serves more as a way to develop the product, but not really to advertise it or to reach the end users, right?
Yes and no, because then you get into a couple of interesting nuances. So I would say, first of all, the licensing of the open source software has an interesting side benefit because an Apache v2 license or an MIT license is very permissive. It's not very hard to get your bosses or your management of a company to agree to let you use Apache licensed piece of software. So it passes through the corporate governance fairly easy. Makes adoption easier in that sense. So there's that. And then it is fair to say that some open source communities can create buzz especially among developers, if it's a developer related component. And so this allows you to fairly inexpensively drive some awareness.
And if you're kicking off an open source project, what are the best ways that you know to generate demand to get on people's radar, to get people to sign up or to start contributing?
First of all, if you know a bunch of people who can help, and especially if they have some notoriety and standing in developer communities and circles and lots of followers on on LinkedIn, that can help a lot. So a lot of open source kind of work is a lot of orchestration with people and the like. Some other things you can do to drive awareness. That's one of the reasons why some people like to bring a open source project to something like the Apache Software Foundation, because it does have sort of a built-in community and in a way to improve some awareness. Probably the biggest thing you can just do though is have usable software that people can solve problems with fairly easily.
So how do you incentivize developers to contribute to your project? I mean, is it really because, I mean, just for do they do that for the sake of just contributing code because they like it, or they do it because it gives them like a kind of like on Stack Overflow, it gives them, some badges or reputation that can help them later?
That could be a whole nother topic, is what are the incentives for people to participate in open source projects, and what is just. But I would say the reasons why people will start an open source project is because they're trying to do something for their company, or they're trying to offload the development of something they're doing for their company. But in a lot of cases, it's a labor of love. It's just something they enjoy working on. And in terms of for other people besides, say, the people who have the specific interest in setting up and governing the project, additional contributors, it could be because they're just interested in the topic. It could be because they are actual users of the software and they want to see bugs fixed, or they want to see new functionality, and so they're contributing the code to get the benefit of the software. And in many cases, a lot of companies actually do pay developers to go and contribute to third-party software projects as well. Presumably, those are projects that those companies are making use of the software.
And can you use it also? I mean, the open source project also as a kind of to build a kind of a trial for the product?
Yes, you can, and that's an interesting discussion too. So as I mentioned before, a well understood permissive license like Apache v2 is pretty easy to get your bosses to say, sure, okay, you can use that software, and so that certainly helps drive the adoption. And it's in theory something you can use forever, but it has some drawbacks to say like a proper software trial. So there's some trade-offs for that. The first I would argue is that a real serious evaluator of the software shouldn't need a lot of time. So, the unlimited usage isn't necessarily that important. And so maybe that's where a trial software with a limited time frame could actually be more beneficial in accelerating the evaluation of that customer. The second thing is, if if you're running a freemium model for your software, so where the open source version has baseline functionality, and then you're trying to upsell a premium version with enterprise features or whatever you might be calling your your extra capabilities. Your open source software will not have those high value features, and so your customer is not becoming accustomed to those more important features. And second of all, that maybe your more important features are in fact the differentiating different or the differentiation of your software versus say all the other alternatives. So really what you want is someone who's evaluating, you want them to be using your premium software and using your premium features, not using some free baseline. And then the last piece I would basically say is a lot of open source software can be a little difficult to set up. And so it's just you're taking that much longer for your evaluator to reach that point of value realization versus say like if you're able to offer them a time bound SaaS trial.
So in a way, you can use that, if I understand you correctly, as a kind of a PLG. I mean, product-led growth.
PLG on the cheap. It's cheap to start, but it can cost you in the end if you're not careful. And again, you're not necessarily qualifying people. You're just really driving awareness with that capability. You might end up competing against yourself if you haven't sufficiently differentiated the premium from the baseline. If you're not careful about what you're doing, you can cost yourself more in the long run.
You mean because you're giving away software for free, and it may be difficult to differentiate and to move people from the free version to start using the premium features?
Yes, if you have not made the premium sufficiently differentiated from the baseline.
Okay, but it is a viable strategy, though. I mean, to get people to use the free software,
Yes.
and as a kind of a PLG strategy where you can just get them on board, get them to start to use that, and try to sell them, upsell them with your premium features. Then,
Yeah, and however, I've even seen more creative approaches that I would say that fit open source even better. I'll give you an example. So one of the open source projects I've worked with in the past is is called the LF Edge Eve. That's the Linux Foundation Edge. So it's an IoT foundation, and Eve is the name of the name of the project. So EVE, and this is a hypervisor for IoT devices. In other words, it'll let you run any manner of Linux or IoT on any device. And the company that created this open source project is called Zadida. It's a IoT startup. And basically, their model is give away this device hypervisor. You can think of it as like a operating system for devices, and give you that away for free. Because the more people who adopt this software, is more addressable market for them to be able to sell their SaaS software, which is essentially a cloud controller for all of these different devices. So that makes sense where you have a control point you give away that has some value unto itself, but then you sell a premium add-on on top of that. And by the way, they're doing really well. They just closed 72 million in a Series C funding. So goes Adida. I'm very proud of where you guys are going.
follow-up question on the topic of PLG and getting people engaged with your free product and all that.
Yeah.
So what strategies would you use to convert people from the free version to the paid version? I mean, some people use like support or different SaaS features. Do you think that's enough to create conversions, or do you think there's other strategies that companies should consider?
I first of all, if so, let's say your company has a legacy of having an open source project, and that's how, and that's how you've sort of come to life, and that's like a lot of software infrastructure companies are like that. In the evolution of these companies, oftentimes somewhere along the line they start a SaaS version of their product, and that also makes it easy then to have a proper SaaS trial to go with it. But you already have this legacy of creating open source software that people can download. If you're lucky, you get their contact information in exchange for the free software. So how do you switch over to this trial, or how do you get people to consider the commercial versions of these? First off, I would say don't just say, "Oh, the SaaS is easier," so people will just automatically move to the SaaS, because that has two problems. Is number one, it might actually not be enough. But the second thing I've seen is it actually opens up you to a competition from like the hyperscalers. AWS might take up your software as well and provide that as a service, or you see this with other kinds of service providers. And so, this has led to some unfortunate relicensing dramas that we've heard about with famous open source projects like Elastic and Terraform, where the companies have had to say, okay, maybe we shouldn't do Apache V2 license because now people are making money trying to provide the as a service, as are we. So you need to have clear premium features. You need to have a clear differentiation and understanding of what people who have big problems need and to get benefit out of that software. And so the premium software or the greater platform that you provide there needs to have a significant increase in value. So once you have that clear differentiation, then the next thing you do is you say, hey, open source user, do you have the following additional problems besides just the one thing that the free widget does for you? Try our trial. And so that's the qualifiers. These people their willingness to take the open source commercial trial gives you a sense that they're a little more serious of an evaluator.
And so let's talk a little bit about the go to market of open source.
Yeah.
So maybe you can outline in general, the value of open source over trial.
Again, it's really the simplicity of the license. And so, and in theory too, I guess there's a second side thing I would say is people who their project or their use case is not sufficient to get them to want to pay you money, usually because either it's just something they're doing for their personal use or not that important to the company, or even it's just them trying to learn something. The way I guess the analogy I use is it kind of puts down weed barrier around the tree of your product, because other projects won't come in and start picking off or growing into the low value opportunities while you're trying to upsell the high value opportunities. So if someone is using your free open source project and doesn't want to pay you for the premium version, most likely they're not going to go pay your competitor for a premium version. They're happy to use your free software. So you lose to yourself, but you don't lose to a competitor. And maybe someday along the way, they will have a new project that will be suitable for your premium software. That I think is one benefit. A second benefit, I guess, or a third benefit, I would say, is that kind of ability for getting a lot of people to try out the software and learn about the software, even if they don't have a project that they want to pay you money for a premium version. You may later on find them to be an internal ally in your customer when you do find a big project and an opportunity to sell your premium software, because they might be, oh yeah, that Rundeck stuff, I used it before, it's great, and suddenly they're like having an internal advocate because they're familiar and had a good experience with the software. It solved some problem, even if they never did buy a subscription.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not just in open source, but often, this freemium model, in SaaS in general, sometimes it works really well, but often, I mean, I've spoken to many SaaS founders who say that, they started with a freemium model, but then they basically dropped it because the free users almost never convert. It's not true to everyone, but for some products, the free users don't convert later to paid users, and even though they provide you with the usage that you need in order to build your product, to basically like to see what they like or don't like and improve your product, if they don't eventually convert, then there's not much value. So my question is, there's always a chance where if you're using that approach, you may be actually like shooting yourself in the foot and getting users that are not going to convert, building a product for them basically and not for the target audience. Whereas if you just had a paid version to begin with, you may have attracted, maybe it would have been more difficult to attract the right users in the beginning, but you would attract the right ones and not people who just want to use it for free, right?
You certainly have that issue. I mean, a user of open source software is absolutely not band qualified, and if we need to define the acronym, that's means they have budget, they have authority to make to choose software, they have need, and they have timeliness. So a open source user, they have need, they may or may not have timeliness, but they don't have budget and authority, nor are they going to ask for the software unless they have a big project. So I mean, I think that's a pretty standard thing when you give things away for free anyway. So, that's if I sounded like I like time bound trials, the answer is yes, I do. And that's the transition we made with Rundeck, is when we had the runbook automation commercial SaaS version available, we, as quickly as we could, created a trial experience so that people that want to try out the premium features without having to worry about installing software, get them to experience what the software can do for them as fast as possible.
Is there also another aspect to it in terms of, for example, if you have a free version, and you can see that in many different products in industries, if you want to use the freemium model, people start using your product for free, and then they end up hopefully they end up upgrading. Does that work? It probably works in specific markets, or where the market is large enough to have enough people use your product and then upgrade. I mean, it's probably less viable for, I don't know, enterprise software, where there's like less companies, or your target audience is smaller, like upper market and so on. Can that work also there when you're trying to sell up market?
It can work great in enterprise. Like I said, Apache licenses are great. They flow everywhere. So enterprise software companies are huge users of open source software, but you still have to have a clear understanding of who's using your software and how are you going to have somebody convert, because just because anybody can use a piece of software doesn't mean that they're the one authorized to make a purchase or have the budget to do it. Matter of fact, they probably chose your free product because it was free and it was easy to get their hands on it, as opposed to going and ask for a 50 or $100 or $1 million budget request to get a piece of software.
And how do you go about really communicating the fundamental values of the product?
It's no different than commercial software. I mean, every open source software needs to be able to explain what the product can do for them, how it's different from alternatives. A well set up open source project will have a clear description about the product, why a user should use it, and the licensing. This would be at a minimum in a README in the GitHub repository. But if you're trying to promote adoption of the open source software, or find additional committers, you're probably going to want a good marketing page for the software as well. And related to that too is good readable documentation is also very important, so that people can understand exactly how to use the software and get up and running with it. Documentation, by the way, is another area that you can collaborate with contributors and end users in an open source project.
So in terms of building the community and getting the community engaged with the project, are there any important techniques that you used in order to do that? Is it only through the product itself, or are there any other activities that you need to do in order to get the community engaged?
So, I mean, I would say one thing is, if a open source product, or any product for that matter, has adoption, it has people using it and buying it, and let's say the usage of that product is has some complexity, or there's different ways to use it, a community of users is going to form around it. The question is, are you ignoring it or are you supporting it? For this, the second thing I would say is, you would go back to what are the purposes of why you created an open source project in the first place. Who is it that you want to have in the community that you care about? Are you looking for more developer collaborators, or are you looking for end users? The next thing is helping people become members of the community. Essentially, the way you become members of the community is becoming a user of the software. So you need easier onboarding for the potential end user. So that would mean make sure you have we call it convenience binary, because in theory, a open source contributor could easily download source code from GitHub and build it themselves. But if you have a piece of software that's easily to download and install, then that's the convenience binary that will encourage more end user adoption. And so you want to have that for free, and you want to have content that helps those end users successfully install that software and successfully achieve the first chance of value, to understand how the software can help them. So that's the minimum the sort of the minimum entry point to get anybody to really be a participant in one of these communities. Once you've done that, you can either have your own interaction points. So maybe you're running a Discord or a Slack for that community, or you could even encourage them to go to Stack Overflow. We actually had a rather organic Rundeck community show up on Reddit. So so they will congregate in different places.
In terms of the channels that you focus on today in marketing, how significant is open source still is for PagerDuty?
For Rundeck, the open source community remains important for our development process. So we look at it as primarily a developer collaboration forum. We still provide an open source binary for users that want to download it and make use of it, but our primary go-to-market is focused around our SaaS version, the premium features that are offered there, and the online trial that we provide.
So it's more in terms of development of the product, or still like
Yes.
maintaining that community, and then it's not that significant anymore in terms of your go-to-market.
Not for the PLG, no.
Okay, I think we're actually out of time already. It's been very interesting. It's definitely a more technical approach to marketing, and definitely very valuable to companies selling to developers. I've learned a lot. Thank you very much, Greg, for joining.
Thank you very much.